Deputy Chancellor. The Honourable Justice Elizabeth Fullerton is currently a Judge of the Supreme Court of New South Wales, a position she's held since 2007. She's had an extensive career in the legal system since being admitted as a barrister of the Supreme Court of New South Wales. She worked in private practice and was appointed as the first in-house counsel in New South Wales for the Commonwealth Director of Public Prosecutions. Her Honour's principal field of practice at the bar was as a trial advocate in Commonwealth and state criminal matters, and she has appeared as trial counsel in the Supreme Courts of Western Australia, Queensland and the Northern Territory as well. As a barrister, she developed a specialty in managing the prosecution of multi-defendant drug and conspiracy trials and gained a reputation as one of the most accomplished and skillful advocates in her profession. Her Honour was also retained as Senior Counsel to act for and advise the New South Wales Crime Commission. As a Judge of the Supreme Court, she's presided over a number of high-profile and very difficult criminal trials. In addition to her leadership roles in the law, Her Honour has also served on the boards of a number of charities and public organisations, including Performance Space, the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras Board, the City Recital Hall and the Australian Centre for Photography. Throughout her career, Her Honour has been committed to public legal service, and she has also been particularly focused on advancing the careers of women in the legal profession and at the bar. She continues to be involved in legal education through speaking engagements and through her mentorship of young lawyers. Deputy Chancellor, it gives me the greatest pleasure to present to you for admission to the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa, Elizabeth Lillian Fullerton.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. May I only briefly add the fact that Her Honour commenced at Monash University and undertook an arts course majoring in political science before she moved her residence to New South Wales and commenced her law course at the University of New South Wales, from where she graduated in 1983. So there is an important Monash connection, not just the magnificent career in the law that Her Honour has enjoyed. With those few words, it gives me the greatest pleasure to, and with the authority of counsel, admit Elizabeth Lillian Fullerton to the degree of Doctor of Laws honoris causa. And so I will now ask Her Honour to deliver the graduation address, which I know will be both inspiring and memorable, and I say that before the event.
Deputy Chancellor, the Honourable Peter Young, President and Vice-Chancellor, Professor Margaret Gardner, my very long-standing friend and mentor, the Honourable Justice Dr. Mark Weinberg, Dean of the Faculty of Law, Professor Byron Horrigan, members of the faculty, ladies and gentlemen, small people who have remained quiet largely, and especially the new graduates. Let me begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. It is nothing less than an enormous privilege to have had an honorary doctorate in laws conferred by the university, where I was given the opportunity 40 years ago to commence my undergraduate study in law and to take out my arts degree in political science. When my mother stood in a long line outside the Menzies building in the summer of 1978 to enrol me, neither she nor I could have imagined that I would be standing here today wearing a bonnet. I remember my first day on campus as a mix of bewilderment and terror. It was actually far more terrifying than the bus ride through the Khyber Pass I had survived a few weeks earlier en route home, where the safest seat was on the floor as gunshots pinged in the air overhead, and only marginally less bewildering than the last of a multitude of border crossings in the former Yugoslavia, when I was commanded by one gun-slinging border official to surrender my passport, which I did, before being ushered into a hut where another gun-slinging official demanded American dollars for its return, which I paid. Although I was born and educated in primary and high school in Melbourne, I have never practiced law in Victoria. As Peter has told you, after taking my arts degree from Monash in 1981, I did a geographical to continue my study of law in a graduate law degree offered by the University of New South Wales. That is not to say, however, I have never been involved in litigation in a Victorian court. There was that road rage incident in 1976. On my account, from the witness box, I was modestly driving a Mazda RX-7 when another person ran me off the road. The outcome of that story is for another day. In receiving the honour conferred on me today, I am in good company. Kylie Minogue has had an honorary degree in health sciences conferred on her for her contribution to raising the awareness of breast cancer. Bon Jovi has had an honorary degree in rock pop conferred on him. There is, however, no more worthy, I should say, a recipient than Kermit the Frog. He was awarded his honorary doctorate in amphibious letters, and after delivering a graduation speech at the Southampton College in New York, he encouraged the graduands to whom he was speaking to go green. To have an honorary doctorate in laws conferred by this university without me writing a word or singing a note is truly an honour. When I was a barrister, I wrote submissions, but I seemed to always have a lot more to say on my feet. I revelled in pitting myself against an opponent, almost any opponent would do. Sometimes I found my sparring partner on my side of the lectern. One member of senior counsel, with whom I share the stage today, and with whom I regularly worked as a junior counsel, was heard to say in my hearing that even my notes to him whilst he was on his feet were argumentative. I started writing in capitals just to prove the point. As a judge, the opposite is true. For the last 12 years, it seems all I ever do is right, although never in capitals. And at least for the most part, I try not to argue with counsel or harumph too loudly under my breath. Unlike those with whom I share the stage today, whose doctorate was conferred after hours of scholarly research, polishing the text, under the mentoring eyes of supervisors of distinction, a judge does not have to justify the analysis of facts or law that underpin a decision. I have, it is true, received suggestions on syntax from time to time, but they are delivered usually politely. As an aside, may I say, I am truly and genuinely in awe of those of you who have had a doctorate conferred on you today. Your practice, your commitment to theory informs all of us in practice, and I honour you. Whether my ultimate decision as a judge is correct or flawed is judged by other judges. Being judged by other judges, amongst the cleverest and most courageous thinkers I know, is unavoidable. When one of my judgments has been reviewed by the Court of Appeal or the High Court and a decision is pending, my own particular variation on the imposter dream resurfaces, and it seems to remain on repeat like a bad news cycle as the days extend to weeks and sometimes months before the Court of Appeal or the High Court pronounces. When the dream bites really hard, there seem to be two narrative lines that collide on one another. The first is I'm catapulted back to being a primary school teacher, where a class of 6-year-olds managed to unmask me as a fraud because indeed I have to confess I faked understanding long division even when I was teaching it. The second narrative is where I receive a call from the Chief Justice of New South Wales, casually advising me that those classes in succession, which I ducked in 1983, have been uncovered. My absence has been noted, and would I please make the appropriate arrangements to vacate the building. Waiting to find out whether a judgment has survived unscathed or been underturned, and any judge will tell you being overturned is a dark day in the job, is not so difficult from what I expect was for all of you at one time or another in the course of your undergraduate or postgraduate studies, also a dark day, where, as you waited for the posting of exam results or the wielding of the supervisor's pen, you were gripped with tormenting states of self-doubt and anguish. How vulnerable we all are to self-doubt. Yet, you are all here today, graduates and postgraduates of a world-class university. You have survived, you have excelled, and you should all feel justly proud. This is also a signature day for those close to you, many of whom are here today, who have supported you. They should be also immensely and justly proud, but new challenges lie ahead. Proffering advice about those challenges is not intended to patronise you. It's advice I could as easily give myself as a judge continuing in the work that I do as it is for the work that lies ahead of me when I no longer judge. My friends, can I suggest this? Be resolute in your vision of what you want to achieve, whether it's in practice or in academe, but be flexible about the detail. Be prepared to modify the things you feel resolute about while surrendering none of your principles in the process. As you progress along your chosen career paths, be the judge of your own situation. Wherever you might find yourself along that way, however taxing the situation and however confronting the people around you might seem at the time, act upon that self-adjudication, but tolerate the thought that it may take you time to fully realise your potential and for others to see it. Whatever your career identity is or becomes, constantly review the person you want to be. Whatever your personal circumstances, perhaps limited only by moral constraints, make your own way. When Polonius said to Hamlet, "To thine own self be true," we've heard that echo over 500 years. It was a short statement that needed no unpacking. In a workplace environment, your primary obligation, which I suggest is to yourself, will be informed by your obligation to others, but your obligation to others should not displace the obligation you owe to yourself to make your own way. It is tempting, even alluring, to adopt the mindset of work as your identity, but that identity is also intensely limiting. It's perhaps a natural outcome of what you may have become or led to believe from the picture-perfect workplace hubs that are presented on television and elsewhere. You may have become allured by the concept, or even accept, that work should be a passion and not a chore. The truth is, work never promises transcendence, neither is it at the single source of your identity. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not a lesson on a life-work balance equilibrium. Heaven knows I walk the tightrope daily. It travels far deeper than that. The challenge for all of us is how to work with the obligation we each have to be our authentic selves, without the risk of authenticity spiralling into a paralysing state of narcissism. We all share the realities of uncertain and unsettled times ahead. Now, you see, when that happens in a courtroom, you know what I usually do? I ask the person to stand up. I ask the person to hold their phone up, and I threaten to put it in a glass of water. There are unsettled, there are indeed unsettled and uncertain times ahead. There isn't a newspaper or online feed line or opinion piece that doesn't remind us, and in the starkest terms, that the devastation of human life is in view as the minute hand races to midnight, fuelled, as we all know, and we're all responsible for it, for decades of frenetic consumption with an arrogant expectation of abundance. It hardly needs me to say we are all in that together. Still, we are obliged to be our authentic selves and to work hard towards a better time ahead. A related challenge in that pursuit is how we embrace and endorse the right of each of us to speak up and out against that with which we categorically and fundamentally disagree. Whether that issue of disagreement is famed in ideological, cultural, or faith-based terms, we must, however, always be prepared to listen to a radically different point of view. After listening to that beautiful musical interlude, there is, you see, no music without rest. There is no speech without silence. As an undergraduate in political science and moral philosophy on this great campus in 1979, I was introduced to what had been published in 1859 as a short essay by John Stuart Mill simply entitled On Liberty. Reading that work as a feminist then, and I am a feminist now, the emphasis on individuality and the right to speak and be heard as a bulwark against the tyranny of the majority resonated with me. After witnessing, and we've all borne witness to it, in multiple ways, the fallout of the impenetrable darkness in some quarters of the internet where hate speech and its inspiration to violence and worse is prevalent, it is, quite frankly, a challenge to maintain an unqualified commitment to the fundamental philosophical privilege of freedom of speech and its underpinnings in the rights of the individual and personal freedom. The online forums that advocate, for example, in that dark place, white male supremacy, are not the only sites where, as a professor of sociology at Syracuse University described it, and I quote her, public discourse is injected with ideological steroids. It's not the failure of the internet that has driven online extremism and the vulgarity and bigotry that is promoted. They exist because users of the internet populate those sites, and of course they are accompanied by the broadcast power of social media companies. Perhaps the challenge for all of us as internet users is to act more like a responsible, mediated and coordinated press corps by ensuring our access, and we will all continue to access the net and the engine of information that it drives, but to ensure that when we share content, even if we do so in derision, we are not providing the oxygen of amplification. Over the last decade, perhaps longer, the identity politics of colour, ethnicity and gender have reframed our political and social discourse. That's not a bad thing by any means. Belonging, feeling endorsed and included is part of what makes us human in human society. The challenge in all our dealings, whether it be at play, whether it be at work, is to be mindful of treating others with whom you do not immediately identify with the respect they deserve and to provide them with a seat at the table alongside you. Armed as you are with either the combined undergraduate degrees, which I must say are simply breathtakingly, you must be so clever, it's frightening, or the postgraduate qualifications, which I've already honoured, the persisting reality of any bias must be named where it is encountered, however you gender identify, whatever your class, as you assume it, whatever your colour, as you proudly wear it, and whatever your ethnicity. Fighting against bias and the barriers to advancement that it entrenches has the capacity to raise the tide, and we are all raised accordingly. I returned to campus in October last year to deliver a graduation speech after almost 25 years in practice as a barrister in New South Wales and, as has been noted, 12 years a judge. On that day, I was, perhaps not unsurprisingly, struck by the scale and spread of campus. I had expected the spatial footprint of the university campus to have expanded and for the amenity that enhances life on campus to have improved considerably. What I didn't expect was what I found in the law school. I approached the law school with Dean Harrigan as my tour guide, not expecting terribly much, I must tell you. The building still looked the same, squat, serious and forbidding. Sound familiar? It was only when I descended to the lower ground floor that I was taken aghast. Instead of finding a lonely instant coffee machine with a powder milk option and a moribund bank of heavily posted grey steel lockers that nobody used whilst I was there, there was in its place an architecturally designed, fully functional virtual courtroom, linking the law school with forensic environments in Melbourne CBD and doubtless beyond, and capable of reaching out and creating that virtual space in real time. That initiative, amongst a raft of others that you know better than I, elevates Monash University into a class of its own. And ladies and gentlemen, behind me and in front of me, wearing the gowns of your academic movements, you are in a class of your own. It is your thoughts, it is your collective action that will provide the precursors to change. You are not called millennials for nothing. My sincere congratulations again to each and every one of you. And as Queen Elizabeth I was once heard to say, let the party begin.